Chapter 11. A soft rapping on the door stirred Isabella awake. A dull ache throbbed at her temples. She stared at the stone ceiling overhead. The weight of her heavy heart pinned her to the hard platform bed. She drew a shallow breath and closed her eyes, wishing to retreat into slumber. But the knocking grew louder. Whoever waited outside her cell was not going to leave her to her misery. Wiping sleep from her eyes, she stood and pulled open the door. The tall, stooped monk who had been her guide the night before stood with eyes downcast. Once again, he did not speak, but motioned for her to follow. After twisting back the way they'd come, he led her down another dark, cool hallway that let out into a small courtyard. Shadows still hung heavy in the sky. She filled her lungs with fresh, warm air, glad to be free from the confines of the cloisters. But her relief was short-lived. She expelled the breath with distaste. It was a treacherous lie, as potent as any betrayal. Within the tantalising, crisp spring air, one breathed life's beginnings, its very origins. But her life had been stagnant before she had even taken her first breath. It was the same as countless women who had come before her. Women with voices unheard. Women with passions left to wane until all desire faded. The space afforded her life was a fraction of the size of the monk's starved cells. She was crammed into a dark hole, and the world ignored her screams. Her fists clenched. She would relinquish every luxury of the body to feel the richness of soul that only love could provide. She would rejoice in the feel of rough wool on her skin if the hands that swept her tunic from her body stoked her passion. "My lady?" Her head jerked up, and she met Abbot Matthew's kind, patient eyes. She cleared her throat and uncurled her fingers. "The wagon is ready." He gestured toward the open gate. Monks with hoods pulled low over their faces waited as if in prayer for her to join them on the benches lining the sides of a rough-hewn wagon. Their solemn reception mirrored her life, disciplined and stark, void of the pleasures that ignite the spirit. Freedom is stolen moments. Jack's words hit her hard in the gut. She was no thief. If freedom was stolen, she was doomed to be chained. She had tasted rapture. Her blood had ignited. Her soul struck deep with a yearning, but now left cold and hollow. How could she return to the echoing grandness of her lonely fortress? She pictured the vast, empty rooms, full of lost dreams and teeming sorrows. Very soon, she would leave behind one prison to join Hugh in another. The towering walls became waves, high and fierce, crashing around her, swallowing her youthful heart. She was not meant to be caged. With word and deed, her parents had taught her that love was as essential to life as food or water. It sustained one's soul. Her tall, gangly monk bowed to her before taking her elbow and helping her climb into the wagon. None of the monks already seated moved from their pious positions, while she claimed her place on one of the benches. As they passed through the gates, their carriage pulled by a team of donkeys, she glimpsed the sun peeking out from beneath the horizon. She gave her despair over to the soft pink light. It tinted the morning fog, which writhed and shifted across the surface of a distant lake, but its sensual dance made her long to feel Jack's lips on her skin. She closed her eyes against the dawn and allowed the countryside to pass unseen. Their journey could never be long enough. Too soon they would be in Berwick. The city walls would be higher than when she left, blocking her view north into Scotland where love dwells. Pounding hooves caused her eyes to open. She stood. A dozen knights approached on horseback, carrying banners bearing the Trevelyan coat of arms. Hugh rode lead. "Bella!" He had seen her. Her heart pounded her ears. She took a deep breath and prayed for strength. She could not deny her truth. She was Lady Isabella Redesdale. She swept her unbound hair away from her face and knotted it demurely at the nape of her neck.
"Abbot Matthew,"
she said, her voice steady, though beneath the surface of her calm facade, she struggled against the inevitable.
"Stop, please. The lord approaching is my betrothed."
"Your what?" she heard a voice say. She sat down and stared at the monk in front of her. His body was still, his head solemnly bowed. Her eyes followed the outline of broad shoulders. Could it be? She clasped her hands in her lap to conceal how her fingers shook and leaned forward in her seat. Narrowing her eyes, she strained to see through his ink-black hood. "Isabella!" Hugh's voice jarred her from her trance.
I am here.
She called, though her eyes remained fixed on the monk. "Praise be to Mary and all the saints! You're alive!" The wagon shook as Hugh climbed onto the back. She had no choice but to look at her betrothed. He stood with open arms, forcing a smile to her lips. She rose, but shifted her gaze back to the monk in front of her. It had to be him. His closeness stole her breath. All she had to do was reach out, and she could once more wrap her arms around his neck.
Throw back your hood,
her thoughts commanded.
Claim me as yours.
Still, the monk did not break his solemnity. Hugh crossed to her side. "Are you hurt? Can you not walk?" Mayhap her heart played with her mind. Mayhap the man across from her was a monk, and in desperation she imagined Jack's voice. She swallowed her hope and turned to face Hugh. His fine blue eyes held nothing but tenderness and concern. She tried to speak, but the words stuck in her dry throat. "My flask," Hugh said to his footman, who hastened to carry out his bidding. She closed her eyes and allowed him to tip the flask to her lips. The rush of liquid brought her throat back to life. At last, she found the will to answer his question.
I am well, my lord.
He smiled with relief. "You cannot imagine my fear. Word of the attack arrived just this morning." He stroked his fingers down her cheek. "I thought I would never see you again." She dropped her eyes in shame. Hugh was all things decent and good, her dearest friend from youth. Why could she find no love for him in her heart? "Come, my darling," he said, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "I will take you home." She nodded, allowing him to draw her forward. As she stepped past the monk, she let her handkerchief drop from her fingertips at his feet. Gaze downcast, she watched strong fingers dart out from long black sleeves and grab it. Jack. Her chest tightened. She could not breathe. Her legs trembled, ready to give way. Hugh's arm came under her knees and lifted her, holding her close. He pressed a kiss to her brow. "I am here now," he whispered. "You need not fear. Not any more." He passed one of his guards. She listened numbly to his command. "Take 4 men and ride with the monks to Berwick. Lord Redesdale and I will hear their testimony. The rest of you ride with me." He set her on the saddle, then swung up behind her. Their horse leapt forward as they galloped away. Hugh held her close. "I know your heart as well as my own, Bella. I will take you away from here, and back to Berwick as fast as my horse will ride." Fresh tears filled her eyes. Regarding the contents of her heart, Hugh could not have been more wrong. Jack remained still, his head bowed as if in solemn prayer, despite how he yearned to cast aside the monk's cloak and chase after Bella and her betrothed. His chest tightened. That fiend of a lord had called her Bella. His fingers curled into tight fists. Of course she was betrothed. After all, she was a lady with title and duty. What had he been thinking? Well, that was just it. He hadn't been thinking, only feeling, yearning for a woman who had no business even talking to the likes of him. Despite her mother's humble birth, she was still an English lady. He glanced down at the handkerchief in his hand. His thumb stroked over the bee elaborately embroidered with silver thread. "So, St. Peter is now Brother Peter." Jack's shoulders stiffened. It was Abbot Matthew who spoke. He lifted his head and cast off the black hood. Cool spring air swept over his neck and ears, exposed now by his newly shorn hair. "Good morrow, Abbot." The older man gestured to the seat beside him. Jack stood and climbed onto the driver's seat. The abbot snapped the reins and they set off toward Berwick with the English guards in lead. "How long have you known it was me?" Jack said. The abbot smiled. I know every member of my order at a glance, even with their hoods drawn. Jack raised his brows and dipped his head, to show that he knew he had underestimated his old friend. Anyway, you're twice the size of any monk I've ever known, the abbot said, chuckling. So, which of your brothers is back there? A smile tugged at Jack's lips. Quinn. I suspected as much, the abbot said. St. Augustine is now Brother Augustine. He shook his head. You ken Bishop Lamberton will not like this. Jack shrugged. It could not be helped. Then you've decided to fight for her. Jack looked the abbot hard in the eye. I'm not leaving Berwick without her, even if I have to kidnap her again. His gaze shifted. He looked at the road ahead, and then at the tired team of donkeys easing them forward at a snail's pace. Could we go any faster? The abbot pulled a little on the reins, slowing their progress. The weight is your penance for lying to me, and stowing away on my wagon. Jack grabbed the reins from the abbot's hands and snapped them hard against the donkeys' backs. I'll go to confession. They surged forward. Forgive me, old friend, but I've a prize to steal. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to enjoy more videos like this one, click the thumbs up button and subscribe to our channel. See you next time out in the Highlands.